thank you so much for those who've tuned into this series, Cult Recovery Not Canceled. I really appreciate it. It really has been a light to me personally, and I think to others during this really difficult time that's been going on right now. And I wanted to thank our presenters who are here today, Cyndi Matthews and Juliana. Thank you guys so much for being here, for spending some time with everything that's been going on. I just so appreciate you guys. And for just a few more people who jumped on, please use the Q&A function today and not the chat. We will receive your questions that way. I really appreciate you guys for being here, and I will go ahead and turn the time over to you guys, and we'll be around though. If any questions come through, I will jump in and let you know.
Hey guys, welcome
Thank you.
today. Thank you, Ashlen. I appreciate that really quite a bit. So I'm going to start here, and this is going to be a conversation between Juliana and myself. So if you have questions during this, please feel free to type them in the Q&A. So I'm Dr. Cyndi Matthews. I teach at Southern Methodist University counseling. I have a private practice, and I mostly do my research and work with people who have come out of high demand religious organizations, high intensity faith groups, and also cults. At SMU, we had this fantastic workshop planned for April 4th with 9 speakers, and we were going to be talking about spiritual abuse in particular, and how that can happen in high demand organizations, fundamentalist religious organizations. And we had 9 wonderful speakers. So over the next couple of weeks, we're going to take at least 4 and have a conversation with them, or I am, and talk about some of the topics. We're hoping that the conference can be in September 19th, I think is the date. Is that right, Juliana?
I'm not sure.
I think it's something like that.
I don't think I received the specific date, but September it is.
Okay, yeah, sometime in September we'll get the word out there. So we're going to have a conversation today about just what's happening for those who are ex-LDS, kind of the crisis and some of the triggers that are going on. This is Juliana Viegas. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, Juliana?
All right, I'm Juliana. I was born and raised in Belgium. I grew up as an active member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And then I left the faith about 5 years ago. We'll talk more about this, but really to know my story, you can feel free to Google my name, maybe not now, listen to us because we're here, but later you can Google my name, Juliana Viegas, formerly Juliana Viegas Hawes. And I have a ton of information about my faith crisis, faith transition. I'm also the host of the Faith Transition podcast, where I tell my story and interview other people. I started this a few months ago, and I'm going to keep doing it to allow more people to tell their stories, and it's very therapeutical. I live in Dallas, and I also lead a group once a month called Thrive. It's the North Dallas Thrive support group for people who leave their faith and it's a crisis for them, or they're having a hard time with the transition. It allows them to share their stories. A lot of times they're surrounded with people who are still believers, and they cannot really share where they're at in the journey. It's very painful. They're struggling with different situations at home or personally, and so it gives us a safe space to share, where they're at in the journey and how we can move forward. So I don't know what else to say.
I'm going to be asking you a lot of questions. Yes. And as people have questions.
Yes, I studied international relations, international politics. I lived in, around the world, Switzerland, Singapore. My family is very international, so pretty much all over the world. And I kind of keep up with everyone on a daily basis now with COVID-19. So I talk to about 4 different continents every day.
That's awesome. Thank you. So just those who might be triggered or want to say, hey, the LDS faith, the Mormon faith isn't a cult or an abusive organization. I just want to validate the experience of those who have had that abuse there, and those who haven't. That's your story. That each of us has a story. And so I was in the LDS faith for 43 years, or I was Mormon for 43 years, and I came out of it. I found it particularly abusive towards me and towards many people around me. Others did not, and that's fine. I want to validate those experiences, both of them. So anytime you find yourself saying, yeah, but that wasn't my experience, that's okay, that's your experience, it was ours. And somehow maybe we can kind of connect and join with things that were triggering, were hard, and work through that, especially at this time of COVID-19. Worldwide pandemic. So first of all, so like I was saying, we are going to redo the Spiritual Abuse Conference in September. I just want to define spiritual abuse for just a second, and it happens often in fundamentalist organizations, high demand organizations, and those are kind of the organizations where the power and the control is centralized at one place, and that can become very abusive. So spiritual abuse is really, it's two things that become abusive. One is the leader can be an abusive person, narcissistic, and it can be any religion that you have a narcissistic, controlling, abusive leader. The other thing is the doctrines can be used to be spiritually abusive. So for example, doctrines against LGBTQ, doctrines against women being told to submit all the time, doctrines against certain ethnicities. For example, before 1978 in the LDS Church, it was blacks in the priesthood, and blacks weren't as valiant. I think that's what Bruce R. McConkie said. They weren't as valiant in the pre-existence. So those kind of doctrines can be used abusively towards certain groups. And then the ultimate spiritual abuse is you get a spiritual leader who uses the doctrines to be spiritually abusive at the same time. And that can be yelling, that can be sexual abuse, physical abuse, that can be ignoring, that can be so many different things that can be utilized to undermine the person as a whole and kind of block. That spiritual leader often stands in the way from a personal relationship with a deity, a God, or whatever spiritual connection that person is looking for. So talking about spiritual crisis of faith, that usually happens when somebody realizes that happens. Juliana, what kind of led to your crisis of faith of leaving the LDS Church? Just kind of get background story, and then we can start talking about other things.
I think it's like I said. I mean, you know, if you want more details on the whole story, you can go back and Google my name, and I tell the full story. I think I lived with cognitive dissonance, which I learned even that term after you know, when I started my faith crisis, meaning that there were things. First of all, my mother joined the church in Belgium when I was about 4 years old, 4 or 5 years old. So I grew up in this faith, you know, I knew nothing else. It was actually a good environment. Like I was never personally, I never felt abused or anything like that, or not seen. My story is pretty different from other people who may have had direct confrontation or, you know, conflicts. I didn't have that. I quite frankly had a very happy childhood in the church. I had a very happy experience. I went on a mission for the LDS Church. I served a mission on Temple Square. So I was really full on. I was serving. I had several leadership positions. And I really enjoyed my relationship with everyone around me. I still have many friends who are still in you know, active members. So what happens for me was more gradual, I would say, at the beginning, and coming out of a mindset where you do not contradict the prophet. Anything that comes from the leaders is, you know, word of God. You don't go against that. Anything that comes at you that may slightly negate or contradict, you should reject, you know, directly. And there you have a red flag already, which of course at the time I wasn't able to see that, because no one should ever be, you know, told not to look at information. Information is information. You do what you will with it. But to say, you know, at least when I was growing up, and I know it's the case for many people I know and I've discussed with who have, you know, left the church or whatnot, but don't touch, don't look. You know, I grew up, the rest of my family wasn't. My mother was a member, my sister I had a brother who was in and out, but the rest of my extended family, no one was member of this, particular faith. And so they would sometimes come up with information that they had found and say, hey, you should look at this. And I would just reject it and block and say, no, it's it's against us. I would say that I grew up with this kind of victim mentality where, we were like this chosen, persecuted people, even though I'm not even pioneer stock, but I related to that and I associated with that, where people want us out and gone. And so we are this, this chosen people, and people are against us, kind of a bit like, I know that in the Mormon faith, we like to kind of compare ourselves to the Jewish people, which I have issues with that, but because there was some persecution, but it doesn't amount what happened with the Jewish people. And so basically I grew up like this, right? And I was very fervent. I was a true believing. I can't even say I could have given my life for the church. As far, I could have gone to war to defend it. I mean, this is how deep I was in. And so so I'm divorced, but my ex-husband, he went through a phase crisis where he started questioning a lot of things prior to me, a couple of years before me. And when it happened to him, he tried to come and share some things, but I was completely close to it. Just like I was saying, anything that was going to talk against the church, I did not want to listen to. I did not want to, bring in. And I think subconsciously, now I know, looking, from the outside, with hindsight, subconsciously, it's a terrifying thing to even begin to question your foundation that you've stood on your whole life. I mean, it's even a thought that when you really are deep in it, you don't even want to go there because it's so frightening, even not knowing what could happen. But subconsciously, I think you put a block to anything that would want to come in and destroy that, because it's just scary. Don't know what's going to happen. So basically, he went through his faith crisis kind of alone. He read Rough Stone Rolling, which at the time, back in 2009, it came out earlier, but he read it around 2009, 2010, was kind of an eye-opener to him. So he goes through major depression, major questioning, just awful time. And I just find all sorts of other reasons why he was upset. Of course, every relationship has issues and every human have problems. So I wouldn't say, I wouldn't recognize that it was maybe the church or his faith or losing faith causing this deep depression. And so that went on, and somehow we got through that. And then at the time we lived in Switzerland, and a friend of mine came there. A friend that I met there. She was from Utah. She was the daughter of some, high ranking, I would say, Relief Society general, person. Like her mother had a high calling in the church, and she was a total feminist, disagreed with so many things, and she's pioneer stock and everything, very much ingrained in the Utah culture, but she was also very much in touch with herself and her feelings and her thoughts, and and so she would contradict a lot the leaders and say, hey, the young woman should have the same as the young man, or we should be having a say in these decisions that are being made. And so basically she was going against the grain to the point where she couldn't agree with anyone anymore, and decided to remove herself, and was shunned and criticized, and the family was just awful to her. So when she told me her story when she came to Switzerland, because of course it's a slow process. She was continuing to go to church, she loved the music, she's a beautiful singer, and she missed that. So I met her, in fact, at church in Switzerland, and we were also running buddies. And so I was wondering, because I'm like, how could such a good person and she was, you know, if you saw her, you would say, oh, she looks so Mormon in a way, because she's just super nice. And, you
Because
know,
there's a look, isn't there?
yes, there is a look, and it's fine. I mean, you know, but like, you would be totally surprised that she's not, you know, active and whatnot. And so I started asking her questions and digging, and she started saying things like, oh, you know, Joseph Smith is not quite the person you think he is, and, you know, you should, and I was really perturbed, you know, by the things she would say, but yet intrigued.
Surprised, I'm sure. You must have been so surprised.
And, you know, she's saying, well, I disagree, you know, with the prophet. I disagree. And that was like, oh,
that must have been mind-blowing for you.
At the time, it's like, how can someone disagree? You
no
know,
one's
like,
allowed to do that.
He's like the untouchable, you know, like, and so she opened up my mind a little, because I was curious. I wanted to understand, and also her family treating her so poorly, her mother saying things like, you know, it would have been better for you not to be born, that, you know, kind of shaming her family like that, you know, because the picture perfect family is always, for some,
well, and the shaming
super important.
The shaming comment of it would have been better for you to never have been born.
Yeah, I mean, the stuff that was going on. And so that happened, which caused me to and you know, like I say in my story, so I did the Mormon Stories with John Dehlin, and it's little trickle here, little trickle there. It's not just one thing, right? It's many things, and in, you know, for people who are, you know, ex-Mormon or whatnot, like we like to call it the shelf. You know, we have this shelf, and we start putting things on that shelf, you know, that bother us, but we're like, okay, I'm not going to dig into that, but I'm a little bothered by that. And you keep building that shelf, and at some point that shelf becomes so heavy that it breaks. I mean, you just can't take it anymore. And for me, so she was kind of a bit of the trigger of my questioning. And then I also had read Carolyn Jessup's book, Escape, right? And she wrote Escaping from the FLDS. And that was actually a couple of years prior to me meeting this friend I'm talking about. I read the book Escape by Carolyn Jessup, leaving the FLDS community. I knew just about nothing about them. I knew the name, and I knew they were polygamous, and I knew they were weird, but I never dug into, sorry, like, I don't mean that.
No,
I mean,
it's just funny you say weird, but so many of the things that Mormon LDS do are weird too.
So reading that book opened my eyes to the similarities that these people had and we had as mainstream LDS people. And I was shocked. I'm like, oh my, and because I had already heard of priesthood abuse. You know, I'm the priesthood leader, listen to me, women being psychologically, even physically abused, but, you know, it's their fault because the priesthood leader has the last word and has the, you know, the power of God. So, you know, and I had observed several situations like that already, which had upset me to the, you know, to my core. So that was laying super heavy on my shelf, like the priesthood, you know, women being kind of lower and not overtly, because it's always, oh, we're equal, but, you know, just sit there and let us make the decision kind of thing, right? So there were things that were bothering me. And so when I read that book, I saw so many similarities as far as, like, you know, the keep sweet mentality just creeped me out. Of women are supposed to just kind of follow, be, you know, very submissive, and it wasn't as overt in, just for everyone, French is my native language, so if I say things weirdly at times, that's the reason. You probably noticed the accent too, but so yeah, I could see the similarities, and that creeped me out. In fact, I remember posting on Facebook, everyone should read this book, because guys, we need to pay attention, because we're not too far from that. And if we don't pay attention, you know. And then
I remember reading that book and giving it to my mom, because I was really creeped out by it too. I gave it to my mom hoping that she would see how creepy it is and how similar it was. And all she did was say, oh, they're so weird. And it was like, don't you see?
Yes. And I think a lot of people do that. And I think we do as human beings, like we tend to not turn the mirror towards ourselves. Like it's easy to say, oh yeah, they're so weird, but we have nothing to do with this. But
right.
And so the ball started rolling. It started like a small little snowball of, issues I had, and it just kept on rolling bigger and bigger. Somehow, maybe she told me about it, or I don't know how I came across. I came across the Mormon Stories with John Dehlin, because I started questioning a lot of things at that point. I was starting to question a lot of things. Came at the same time. Life goes on. You go through the ups and downs and relationship issues, and I read all these books that are mind opening, or help you question. I read the Road Less Traveled. I read Brené Brown, books, and she was actually a real key person in my faith questioning and faith transition, because the whole, be authentic, be yourself, have that courage to, listen to your inner voice and things like that. And I decided to go on that journey to be like, okay, what is it I really want to believe, or like, why do I not listen to these triggers, or this, cognitive dissonance? So these unease I felt inside, like, what is it? And so the more I start digging into that, wanting to be my authentic self, wanting to express myself the way I am, disagree if I want to disagree. And then on the other hand, I started listening to Mormon Stories. The reason, oh my goodness, it kind of all came almost at the same time. It sounds a bit jumbled, because it was a bit jumbled at the time. Somehow I came across the LGBTQ, Mormons who are, and now it's like a few years, and I should have written it down. I can't think of the page, but there was this page of Mormon, LGBTQ kids who were testifying about their experience.
No, you're talking on Facebook, right? A Facebook page you came across?
It was a website. It wasn't on Facebook.
Okay.
It was a website, and I don't know how I came across that. But they talk about the experience, growing up as gay and lesbians in the church, and they still want to hold on to their faith. But you read those stories. I don't know if it's called like There Is Hope or something like that. I'll find out, and when you talk, I will look it up and then come up with it. But
you're good.
And I read these stories, and my heart just is ripped apart, because they were not even complaining per se, because they were like, yeah, they were kind of accepting the fact that, it's their burden in life. But then they talk about their experience with their bishop telling them things that are very damaging. And I read every single one of their stories, and
it's so heartbreaking to read the stories.
I was just ripped.
Yeah.
I was ripped, and I'm like, no, I can't. This is just, I can't agree with this. And so I started disagreeing. I wasn't leaving per se, but I started disagreeing overtly and out loud with so many different things, to the point where, there was kind of like the Mormon moment, right? There was a Kate Kelly coming out, and John Dehlin being excommunicated, and all these things. And maybe that's when I started looking at, what is it, why are these people such a threat? Like, why can they not have that discussion? All they wanted is to have an audience with the leaders and see,
let's have a conversation.
Express. And all they were doing is portraying them as, crazies, which some of the stuff were a bit out there, but you know what? Just talk to them. Talk to them, see what they want, instead of
conversation. Just see what's going on for them,
instead of rejecting, the whole thing. And I had started to listen to Mormon Stories, to John Dehlin, and it was actually helping me, like, kind of stay at the time for some reason, because like, okay, I can be a nuanced, there is some weird stuff, but I was kind of okay for a minute with There was a lot of weird things.
It's kind of a phase we go through of, oh, we see
Mm-hmm.
stuff and it's like, oh, maybe we can be that person that helps the LGBTQ individuals. Maybe we can be that
Right.
person who helps the women,
Or more
whatever.
nuanced, or
And
you know,
yeah,
but
I can do this. I can be nuanced before the shelf just kind of goes like, nah, can't.
for some, because some are still there, and I admire, to be honest, the people who are in. I think Julie de Azevedo is one of them. Like, she's in, but she's doing a whole lot of work to help people struggling with some, you know, and there are a few that, you know, I know people who are in, but they're doing this work of helping those who are like, this is really a struggle, you know?
Right, because there's a lot of damage that's happening.
Yes.
For those who can stay and work within that, good for them. And then there's those of us who are like, nah, can't do it. Got to work with those who have been damaged and are leaving.
Yes. And to be honest, for me, and then of course, you know, one of my ex, well, I'll go to this. My ex is also gay, but he wasn't out for, you know, a long time, but his sister came out years ago, around maybe 2007, 8 or something like that. And at the time when she came out, I was a super believer, right? I was super Mormon, and I was upset with her, not for being a lesbian, but because, you know, she was in Utah, you know, super Mormon Utah, Layton, 4 daughters, you know, they were like this picture perfect family. And then this happened, and I was just so upset that, in my opinion, she should have waited for the kids to grow up and leave the house, and then she could have lived her life, you know?
Oh, so she should have just kept that to herself.
Yes.
That was her burden to live with,
like,
instead of being authentic.
to make a sacrifice. Yeah. But I mean,
okay. Yeah.
I've learned you know, after that, you know, I've learned that that's not something you should require of anyone. But
no, but that is the Mormon thinking. Everyone has their burden. They have to be selfless and keep their burden to themselves.
Right.
And keep, you know, the kind of a keep sweet mentality,
right,
narrow kind of thing.
Right. You just sacrifice. You do what you got to do. It doesn't matter if you're unhappy. And so my reaction was completely off. We used to be really, really good friends. I mean, we are now, but at the time, you know, before she came out, we were really good friends. I mean, to the point where we would have given our kids to them if we passed, you know, because we were that close, and, you know, they were like this picture perfect family. And I stopped talking to her like for years. I was so upset. And later on, I mean, I did apologize when I had my change of heart and change of mindset, and recognize my stupidity. I mean, I did come out and apologize, but so she had been out, and so when I read all these stories of the gay kids in the church growing up in such pain and whatnot, like, that's when the coin, you know, fell for me. And I'm like, oh my goodness, you know, what kind of reaction did I have, and what kind of suffering she must have gone through also, growing up in this, you know, community that was not supportive at all of, you know, LGBTQ kids. I mean, they've made slight efforts in the past years now, recently, but prior to that, I mean, the things that were said about gay people and the conversion therapy, which I learned about, I mean, just appalling actions and all these things made it so, yeah, I could not belong to this church anymore. I mean, there was so many, and of course, you know, as you read my story, and I started writing when I came out, op-eds in the Salt Lake Tribune, and expressing why, because I had been so active in the church. I had worked for the church, for the church education system. I've served a mission on Temple Square. I knew hundreds and hundreds of people. And I did not want people to speculate about why I was leaving, or think, oh, she just want to sin, and she just want to, you know, live like a worldly life and drink and have sex and whatnot.
Which is kind of the thought
which who cares?
Yeah,
who cares? But that wasn't the reason.
Yeah.
And you know, some people live through this in silence and a lot of pain, and that's why I'm doing again what I'm doing with those support groups, because I don't want people to do that. You know, I mean, I think everyone should know that they can, at least, you know, if I can catch someone and make the fall and the hurt a little bit less painful, I will have accomplished something, because I know how painful it is. I've been through it. It's super painful. I was loud about it because I'm just loud.
So where do you think that pain is coming from?
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead. So where's that pain coming from, that it's like, this is so painful, so much so that you want to help catch other people? Where do you think the pain is coming from as the crisis of faith happens? What's going on, do you think?
I mean,
For you,
the betrayal, and I'm just repeating, as I've talked to now hundreds of people and communicate with hundreds of people since it's been since 2015 now, about 5 years that I've come out publicly and written all of things. So I've been in contact with a lot of people, hundreds of people, and the pain comes from the betrayal of not telling the truth. And now the church is trying to gaslight. You've seen they come up with those essays and this and that, because just the wave of people saying, hey, you did not say that to me when I was in primary. You did not say that Joseph Smith translated the Book of Mormon in a hat with a stone and never had the plates in his hands or in the room. Like, why did you show me that picture of Joseph Smith, with these beautiful golden plates? And, all these things that we grew up with, explain a certain way, and anchored in our brain, and we believe, just like you believe in Santa Claus, but we never woke up from it. And then you realize, how stupid was I? There's this sense of like, I'm an educated person who went to college, and even if you haven't, like most people think of themselves as somewhat educated or, not blind followers, but you realize that basically you've been a blind follower, that and then, some will come and say, oh, you should have done your research and this and that. How many hours do we spend in church every Sunday as LDS? 3 hours. Mm-hmm. And in these 3 hours, you're not capable of telling the truth about the history of the church. And you just tell all these stories of Emma being crazy, when no, she wasn't crazy. She was sick and tired of her husband philandering and lying about, all these young girls that he would have sex with and whatnot. And then, it's all that gaslighting. No, it's Emma again. It's the woman who had the problem. She was probably mentally, a little bit not there, whatnot. No, she was freaking upset that her husband was just crazy.
I'd like to make a comment real quick too, based off of a question. Well, it wasn't so much a question, but just kind of affirmation of what you're saying, Juliana. They said most cultic groups say that you leave because of the world, either sex, drugs, etc., kind of like what you were saying. But in reality, most of the time, the cultic group and their behavior pushes you out. This person mentioned this is a conclusion that Dr. Josie McSkimmon made in her book, Leaving Christian Fundamentalism. I just thought that was such a appropriate comment for what you were saying and talking about, how you wanted people to know that wasn't the factors that actually pushed you out. Like, you actually had an informed opinion,
Yes.
But
yes,
they do like to
Ashlen.
justify it, to say, oh, it's because something's wrong with you. But they never take ownership to say something is wrong with the church, something is wrong with the group that's happening within it.
I'm absolutely thrilled that you all are doing some scholarly research on, the process of all this and the abuse and how it's done, because, it sounds, me telling my opinion, even with, hundreds of thousands of other people who think like this and have experienced this, but it's, oh, they say, I said, and, they try to put it down as it's just their opinion. And I am so thrilled and excited to see more and more scholarly research on all of these mechanisms of, abusing. And I did watch that that show that you were mentioning, Wild Country. It's maybe a bit more extreme, but you know what? The processes are the same. Like, you just trap a group, you kind of brainwash them, you feed them, you show off your money and your what you can acquire. It's very difficult when you speak up against super powerful. It's like you're kicking a giant. I realize that anytime I open my mouth to say something I disagree with, I realize I'm kicking a giant. I do not care. I remember people like Viktor Frankl in the midst of, concentration camp. He did not care that everyone around us hated him and wanted him dead. He still kept control of his mind and what he wanted, I mean, to me, he's like the epitome of, you know, and people like Carolyn Jessup. I mean, people like Amber Scora, who left the Witness. You know, when you read her story, you find out about her story. There is this thing, and some, you know, some, again, I don't like to be like us and them, because that was the church mentality.
Yeah, that's the church mentality, in
you know,
and out,
us and them.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
But as a human, you decide who's going to be in control of yourself.
Yeah.
Are you going to be in control of yourself, or are you going to let someone else or an institution, or, you know, your parents, politics, whatever it is? I mean, we are bombarded from the moment we were born with opinions, with this is how you should be and think and whatnot. And today, quite frankly, I know I'm a little bit all over the place here, but I'm so glad that I left when my kids were young, because now I can tell my children to question everything, even me. And to, you know, I put philosophy books in front of them and say, just find out, you know, yes, I can tell you what I think, but I want you to figure out, read and find out. And what do you think? What do you want to believe? Because at the end of the day, we choose what we want to believe.
Well, and I think that's one of the lies that I was told in the church, is that you, through personal revelation, you can find out your truth and what's important for you. But the lie is, it's only good if it matches what the general authorities have said, the church has said, your leaders have said. So it's,
oh my gosh,
they just kind of pass it off as, yeah, you get personal revelation for your own life. Yeah, you can figure out if the church is true, but if you are in disagreement,
yeah,
you
then
are wrong.
Yes, it's the biggest lie. There is no personal revelation. That is complete bullshit. Because as soon as you're like, my revelation is different than what the prophet says, it's like, well, you in the wrong, you know, you like, you crazy like Emma. Just go.
Something's wrong with you.
Go where Emma is.
Well, and you talk about kicking against the giant. We did kick against the giant. However, that giant thought that they were supported by God, because I think some of them actually do believe it.
Oh, probably, yes.
And it gives them all the more power to think, I have this God.
That is the easiest way. It's the easiest way, and it works for any religion. I'm sorry, guys who are listening, who are you know, religious, I would say, because I consider myself spiritual, non-religious. But I think it's the same with every religion, just about, you know. God is ultimately, you know, it's convincing you that you are the vessel for God, and then you can't contradict that, because, you know, I'm the vessel for God. I'm God's spokesperson.
Yeah, I am.
You can't contradict me.
Yeah.
How about be your own?
Like, so Christy has a really good question here, and I'm gonna go. And hi, Christy, good to see you. I believe she's practicing LDS right now. She's an awesome person. I love her. And she's asking what our support system when we left the church, what was that like, and what our spiritual beliefs are now. And that's one of the questions we're going to be asking too. But did you have a support when you left? What was your support, Juliana?
Well, I think I'm a little bit different than maybe some other people that I know struggle with that, because I've talked to a lot of people, and this is again why I do this group Thrive. And we have, as you know, in Dallas, we have the Dallas Area Mormon in Transition group, which provides that community and support for those who want it and need it, that they can reach out to people, and we try to do activities and things like that. But as far as I'm concerned, I mean, I've moved around so much. I'm very adaptable and flexible. I have kids, so I have a lot of things that facilitate. I'm pretty outgoing too. And I'm in the mindset that if you want to create a community or have friends or whatnot, I mean, you have to work at it. You can't just be at home sitting and waiting for people to knock at your door and be like, can I be your friends? Or, you know, do you want to join my group?
So and it's an active participation.
It's an act. Yes. I mean, be creative. Today, I mean, we're in 2020. There is so much, I mean, it's COVID-19 now and we're quarantined, but I mean, you go to a meetup group, or you go find out what you like to do. I mean, have some hobbies or whatever, or start something that you've always wanted to do. But if you like to dance or to hike or to bike or whatever, go find that group, go find those people. They are out there and they've done the same thing as you. They went and found who is it out there that likes to do the same thing I do. You know, everywhere I've been, oh, sorry.
Now, I was going to ask you a question. So your spiritual beliefs now, how is that helping you through COVID-19 right now? So what are your spiritual beliefs and how is that helping you right now? Because I know when I was in the church, it was very much look to your leaders,
Okay.
all that kind of stuff. You know,
as far as community goes,
yeah, as community and spiritual beliefs, how is that helping you through COVID-19? How is that bringing you any kind of peace?
Wait, what? My spiritual, where I stand spiritually, how is that
Yeah.
bringing me some peace?
Yeah.
I
So
think
maybe
I've
go ahead.
So I think I've already done that work prior to all of this happening. I've also gone through a lot of crisis in this past couple of years, including losing my mom a couple of months ago. So I'm not in a panic mode or whatnot. I mean, I did lose my job, but I'm just calm because I've learned to just adapt to whatever situations comes at me and be in charge and in control of my reactions and my emotions. And that's where I focus, because what I can't change around me, I can't change. And then starting to panic about it. The fact I know I don't have a year food supply and maybe have a month's worth, but I have faith in life. I have faith in people. And you know what, if I have to die, I'm gonna die, whether it is crossing the street or whatever. Like, I think people need to chill about that. And I know I'm saying this as someone who knows on a deep level and has been and still is in pain. Like, I'm not showing that part now, but because of the loss of my mother, and then one of my close friends just lost her father. Someone I knew who served in Belgium just passed away. I mean, I am basically getting acquainted with death in a way that, you know what, it will happen when it happens. Nobody knows when it will happen. So, yes, I mean, be wise and try to do what is necessary for your family and whatnot. But there's just so many things we're not in control of right now, right?
So what do you believe spiritually right now? Do you believe in God? Do you believe in an afterlife? Where are you right now in terms of those beliefs?
It's difficult for me to express what I believe, because I don't, I've tried atheism and it didn't suit me. I actively tried to believe in nothing. I don't like to use the word God a lot because it puts me in the religious category, but I guess we need to use words in order to understand each other. I don't like, and I recently watched a comedy, this guy who's like, he just makes a lot of jokes about spirituality and whatnot, but he says, whether you call it God or the universe, at the end of the day, it's the same thing you're talking about. It's this greater power and whatnot. And so I do believe in some kind of greater power that, helps me wake up in the morning and have faith that things are going to be okay. And, it's beyond me. Like, there's something beyond me. I don't know what to call it. And I don't really care to, have specification. Like, I think that's what creates conflicts with religion and people. It's like, everyone wants to be right in how it's described and defined and how it looks like and where it lives, in which kingdom we don't know shit about all that. So
for you, it's okay to be ambiguous and
it's
fuzzy.
very ambiguous, but it's real. So I don't know. It's real. Just like I was, because I observe things in my life. Like, for example, a couple of months ago, maybe 2 or 3 months ago, I reconnected with these childhood friends. One lives in DC, one lives in Belgium. We grew up together in Belgium, but we hadn't talked for years and years and years. And then all of a sudden we reconnect and we're so super excited. And now we've been talking every day. And they were there when I lost my mother a couple of months ago. They knew my mother and they were the biggest support because they knew her and they loved her, and they just lost their father recently. They didn't know it. I mean, he was sick, but they didn't know it was going to happen so soon. But we didn't know this was going to happen. When we reconnected, we didn't know, I was going to lose my mother. We didn't know they were going to lose their father. And the fact that we were able to reconnect at this time and be there for each other is something we can't explain. And to me, that's the beauty of, and that's what I call spirituality, or the fact that, for example, when my mother passed away, I started reaching out to different people to let them know. And I used, I think I told you that story before, but I used a music for the funeral that was a mixture. My mother was born in the Congo and then married a Belgian and so moved to Belgium. And that's how I was born there. But she was born in the Congo from a Portuguese father and a Congolese mother. And I used the music from Kurt Bester. He's a Utah, very good, very great artist. And I had used his music for my wedding, but I used it for her wedding because it's a mixture of classical music and African beats, African sounds. And it was just perfect for her in her life because she had been, she had been in Africa, but she also had been in the West. And it was kind of this mixture that represented her life. And so we played that. And so I reached out to that friend who had introduced me to that music and said, hey, thank you so much. My mom passed away. She also knew her because she served her mission in Belgium. So she knew my mother. And I shared with her that I had shared that music that she had shown me years and years ago. And she was like, wow, this is amazing. Of course, condolences and all that. Because I was on a cruise just a month ago and Kurt Bester was on the boat, on the cruise, and we talked. And I mean, just these weird coincidences that brings people together in some strange ways. To me, that is my spirituality that I honor, that
it's
observe.
unexplainable. Yeah, it's unexplainable, but you don't feel the need to explain it. To
right,
say
right. And you can call it coincidence and this and that. And science sometimes is a bit harsh on like the way it wants to be, also very square about everything. I mean, science first, don't get me wrong. Like I'm going to listen to science before I listen to anything else. But I also don't like the rigidity sometimes that do not allow, experiences that you can't explain. And I've had a ton of those. Again, I am not a religious person. I don't have the need to like pray or whatever. I meditate every day, but to me that's it is spiritual, but it is also very much scientifically proven that it's very good for you, and I'm a proof of that. I mean, it helped me through my faith crisis, my faith transition. It helps me now during this crisis. That's why I'm so calm. Like I lost my job, I just lost my mother. Not that it was easy, it was the worst thing that ever happened to me, and I was a mess. But because of meditation and exercise and those things that I choose to do in my life, I can handle hardship now, and I try not to, I use the tools I have to cope with things around me.
So do you think you're handling them better now than when you were in the LDS church to deal with the hardships, or what do you think?
I think so. Why? Because, well, I didn't have these kind of hardships, but I had hardships like, just more like in my couple and, being a new mom and stuff like that. But I think, oh my gosh, there's just it's like my head has been cleaned up. It's like this attic full of crap and like stuff, like full, that's now how I can describe it the best. But it's like this 100-year-old person who has amassed a whole bunch of stuff in her attic. And when I left the church, I cleaned up that attic, and now it's like minimalist. It's clean. There is only what I want there.
So you really can get in touch with that authentic self and not be like, there's all this other stuff, you should do this, you should do this.
Yes, I would trade that for nothing in the world. Nothing. It's yes, that's where I want to be.
So after I left, my mom passed away, and a number of things happened that were tough, and that was seen by family members who are still LDS. They said, see, God is punishing you. This is punishment for you. Is that something, and that's called magical thinking. If good things happen, you're doing good. If bad things happen, you're doing bad. That kind of thinking. Did you have that kind of experience of when bad things happen, people were saying, see, you should be doing this, or what was your experience with the good and the bad happening?
I haven't had anyone say that to me, but I know it's a mentality that members of the church that are very believing can have. Not everyone. I don't like to put everyone in the same bag, because again, I have a ton of wonderful friends, if they ever listen to this, that are very believing Mormons that I adore. And they're more open-minded, because if you're my friends, you have to be a little more open-minded. But So not everyone's like that, but I know I felt like that. So that means many others did. I know I thought, okay, but now it doesn't even faze me because I can always point out to someone very active in the church who has a whole load of crap happening to them, whether it's cancer or their kids dying or whatever, you name it. It happens. What happens out of the church happens in the church. And I can easily point it out. So to me, it means nothing at all. I mean, that's just, again, it's almost like a superstition, like your garments are going to save you from an accident or whatever. No, people have died with their garments on, like stuff that, it's all, it's just, they're all little ways to control people. And these stories that, perpetrates themselves, it's just so annoying because you always have a group of people who are going to believe it. And I remember believing some of that stuff, I would because it's inspirational and it makes you feel good. And it's like, they almost got in that. Well, I also almost got in an accident several times and didn't die, and I didn't have garment. You can just always, you can always find the same stuff outside,
inside and out.
It negates it like on the spot.
I wanted to jump in because this was a great question that was just asked. What did your daily life look like when you were part of the LDS? How often did your membership in the LDS consume your mind and mental space? I thought it was an excellent question.
It is a very good question. And to be, is it for me or Cyndi or both?
Oh, go ahead, Juliana. This is your conversation.
So to be honest, it's 100%. I mean, when you're LDS, it's like this mantle you wear, and every action you do, almost every action is second, you have to think, okay, how would a good member of the church, what would a good member of the church do? I mean, already it's laid out for you how you should live your life. You should wake up and pray and have read your scriptures, and then you should, go about your day, but always have the Lord in your heart in everything you do. And then, I mean, really, it's whether it's good or bad, whether it helps people, whether it makes people be better or not, sure, but it is a fully controlled, you're controlled, like you're told how you should be, what you should act, what you should do, and then you don't realize that you are, because it becomes a habit, just like, and then you feel super guilty all the time because you're not 100% doing what you should be doing. And so it's this thing. And for me, it was okay, because I wasn't like a guilt ridden person, but like my ex, for example, I mean, he felt guilty about everything because there's so many things you should be doing, like visiting your neighbors and doing this and doing that and doing your calling and being prepared and serving more. I mean, I know some people who have had serious health issues because of how overworked they were by the church, because as long as you say yes, they'll keep adding on responsibility.
It definitely is. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. No.
I was going to say, it's definitely a gospel of works, not of grace.
Oh my gosh.
And it's this perfectionistic thinking, be therefore perfect, and you never can quite measure up. And it is always constantly thinking, what can I do better? What am I not doing? And then going to church and being told, 20, 30 things every sacrament meeting of what you should be doing again, or conference, or wherever it is. Go ahead. You were saying about bishop?
I think 90% of the bishop I had, I mean, I've in Belgium at least. So, and I was in Belgium from, 4 years old until 18 years old before I came and studied here. But so I had, a dozen of bishops. I think 90% of them left, burnt out. They left the church, burnt out, and also they probably found out, all the lies and stuff. But yeah. And what saddens me is to see the health of some of my friends that have gone through some really deep, hard issues. And I know that part of it is overwork. They were overworked. They will never admit it. I know they will never admit it because they're like, oh, it's the Lord's work. But I mean, I'm sure that the Matheson, who were general third area authorities in Europe. You know who I'm talking about? Oh, his first name doesn't come, but it's the Matheson. So anyways, he was in charge of all the different congregations and whatnot, but I'm sure he could testify of that, how the bishops and the stake president and whatnot. I mean, they're all about families, but these people have to spend so much time outside of their home to go and serve and do other things. And, some of the families will say that they didn't see their father or the mother was just constantly like busy bee,
Right. And it's the thinking of, so my dad was a bishop in Ontario for a while when my brother and I were born, which is like a 4-year time span. And my mother, when she would get tired or say, hey, I want you home, he would always say, I wasn't there, but this was what I was told was, I'm doing the Lord's work. I know it's hard. The Lord is going to give you more strength to get through this. And it was, she became kind of resentful to be having these 2 little kids, and he had a job and he was doing the work that he thought he was supposed to be doing, and believed that she was going to get the support that she needed from God. And she was also Relief Society president at the time too. So that just this constant do was overwhelming.
Yeah, and think of those who have 6, 7 kids or whatnot. Like,
right?
Like I don't even.
Well,
know
and we were number
works.
4, and we were number 4 and 5, so she had 3 others as well.
Yeah, because I mean, it kind of went away a little, but that mentality of having a lot of kids was also a big deal. Like if you any of you listen to my podcast, like I have a conversation with Dusty Rhodes. He's a scientist, a herpetologist, and he grew up in a big family, and he's the only one I think who left. And of course, he's looked down upon, but he grew up in a family like that. And at some point, I kind of play devil's advocate, because it's like, oh, and I just resent, the fact that my father, we had this big family and he gave all the money, like for tithing and stuff. I'm like, oh, why did he have so many kids to begin with, And it's like, well, he was, he's like, well, he was following, the example of the prophet or whatever at the time, because, there is this, even whether conscious or subconscious also, however many, kids the prophet has, or, the leaders have, like, you kind of have to match that or whatever, like,
right.
Not to say all the born kids, we love you. We're glad you're here.
So,
but
right. So in terms of right now with COVID-19, are there things that are kind of triggering for you, or things that are weird? Like, I know food storage was a big thing, and right now in Utah, they're seen as the biggest hoarders of food, and it probably has to do with food storage.
Yeah.
When you're thinking, oh, I don't have toilet paper, I don't have all the food, are there things that are kind of triggering for you right now with the isolation, with everything that's going on?
To be honest, it's funny that you say that, because I talked to a friend in Utah right now, last night, and he was like, yeah, I have to go like at 6 a.m. because there's like a long line and people are hoarding, and and he's like, we have not very many cases, and it could kind of not grow, because I mean, it's not going worse or anything like that. Like, I think in some places it's definitely less than others,
And for those who may not know, the LDS we're told to have a year supply of food storage and toilet paper and all that kind of stuff. So it can be a little triggering to see lines and to see that that we're out. But go ahead, go back.
Yeah, and then I heard, and that could be a fake saying or whatever, but someone unfortunately shared it with me, that the prophet would have said, so Nelson, like, yeah, if you've done that, if you do your church at home and you have done your preparedness, then nothing bad will happen to you. But already I think most people will be okay, just because that's the statistics. Most people who get it won't die from it, period. So it's not going to be, and not to say, it's very, very sad when death does occur, but the majority is not going to die. And then what triggers me, it's not so much what I have or don't have at home. What triggers me is the fact that the LDS Church is sitting on $100 billion, and all they find to say to their people is fast and pray, instead of shining and giving away to those who need, healthcare provider and teachers and kids who go hungry. And I mean, there's just so much opportunity to help. And the fact that they are just like lulling the people and waving their white handkerchief when they could be in the first helpers, of all these people who are screaming for help right now, that is triggering to me.
Yeah,
And I wouldn't say anything unless people would just bombard my Facebook with their quotes and whatnot about, all the nice words they said. I don't care about the words they say. I want to see the action, because that's where it's at.
And for those who don't know, there was a story recently out that the LDS Church has $100 billion, and they've come out and said to everybody, we're going to have a 24-hour fast, go without food, continue paying your tithing, pray. And so the trigger is, why are you not doing something with this $100 billion?
Well, I mean, you can go to Wall Street and Washington Post and whatnot. It's the fact also that they don't pay tithing on that, and they just sit on it, and it's just this growing, wealth that, and then it's money, and it's real estate. Like, I kind of scanned through like what was told, during conference, which I don't really care too much, but they're building all these temples all over the world, in China and Dubai and this and that. And it's like, I mean, it's corporation. It's like, it's money and real estate, and you're buying your way in, and, and it's like, well, I hope at least that they'll use that if there is like some kind of, crisis or catastrophe in the world, that they'll use these buildings to help people at least, if it can serve somehow, sure. But if it's just, kind of
so that is very triggering for you to
just watch Wild Wild Country.
Okay.
No, you've seen it. I'm talking to the audience.
I like Gina's question. Did you ever find COVID situation triggering in terms of feeling like maybe they were right? I'll answer that, and I'll let you answer that. I don't.
Maybe they were right about what? Like
that this is the apocalypse. This is the second coming.
Oh my gosh.
So for me, it's not personally like that, but I do have family members who are saying that, and I'm seeing it on Facebook too, of people in the church saying, see, this is the end of time. See, this is about right before the second coming. You need to get back. Here is your time to get back. And for me, I'm like, no. So for me, I've worked through that already. How about for you, Juliana?
Yeah, no, none of that stuff speaks to me anymore. And I've always been in the mindset that, sure, the earth is going to be destroyed at some point. It's not going to be a second coming. It's us doing that work. We're doing it. And if it does end and it's the end of the world, we created that. It's not about God destroying or coming with whatever. I mean, if anything, I do hope that coming out of this crisis, we will all be a little bit more mindful, a little bit more, centered, even though things may or may not have been blown up. I don't know. Like, the media, this and that, like I have because I've looked at the numbers, from previous years, and it was like 32,000 people died of the flu, I think last year. And then the year before, there was a year where it was 62,000. I don't think in the US alone, I don't know that we're going to reach that number. I hope not. And if we, keep containing things, hopefully everyone follows suit. Like, it shouldn't even reach that number. And so I get that it's a novel virus, and, I'm glad we're quarantining because we're probably, saving lives doing so. But to me, what I hope comes out of this is that people are a bit more mindful. I mean, some people live like this every single day, 24/7, like in countries where it's a crisis all the time. I hope that compassion will grow, that we will be more in touch with what matters most, our family, nature, and stop being these busy people destroying the earth, And so if anything, I think it's kind of a good thing that we are forced on a global level to slow down and observe. Just observe. Observe how do you live. Observe what you do, what you're doing, to your relationships, and even looking inside yourself. Some people are going stir crazy. I shouldn't laugh about it because it's not funny, but some of the stars are making me laugh because you can tell that they're so used to like having this big audience and all these entourage, and now they're like, oh my gosh, I'm dying alone in my bed. And I was looking at what was it? Who was it? Sharon Stone, like filming herself in her bed, like half naked. I'm like, what is wrong with you, woman? Like, don't you have someone to call? Like, but they look so freaking desperate. I'm like, look inside. I mean, I don't mind being alone. Like, well, maybe because I have kids, but I enjoy being by myself. Like,
So,
I'm at peace and comfortable, you know. I mean, I'm
so
in touch with a lot of people, but
how are you staying grounded, Juliana? How are you staying grounded during this time? How are you kind of keeping at peace with yourself? But what's going on for you?
so I have my big morning 5 that I decided to kind of abide by. Like, so I wake up, I drink water. I tend to forget to drink water, and I think it's very important that we drink enough water. So water, vitamin. I meditate at least 10 minutes every morning. I go running every morning. I journal. I write 3 things that were the 3 best things that happened the day before. Like every morning I write that, and 3 things I want to accomplish today. I try to tap into my creativity. I love to write. I need to finish my book that I started 5 years ago. I do my podcast. I do try to connect with people, especially people who are in pain. I make an effort to pick at least a couple of people every day who I know either have lost someone or in some kind of pain, they've lost a job or whatever it is. Also, because of the support group I do, I try to reach out to the people there too. So that's how I keep myself grounded. And then, to be honest, maybe that's in the spirituality side of me. I feel like things tend to, when you stay positive or hopeful, things tends to work out in the end, right? I'm still here. I'm still breathing. Things will work out. They don't look so great right now. Like, I don't know how what's going to happen. Like, I lost my job, but I'm just one of 6.6 million or here in the US. Like, I'm not going to be like, oh, poor me, look at me, when everybody's in the same boat. So, I'm happy that, the sun is shining. I can go running. I live in a beautiful place. So, I mean, where there is a lot of trees and nature, there's cows and horses around here. It's Texas, right? So I just make a point every day to find beauty around me, Okay. I also know that I could die anytime. Like, I could get COVID and I could die. Who knows? I don't know. But
I don't know if I could be that calm about it.
No, but in the meantime, but what are you going to do? Stress about it? How is that helping the situation? You know what I mean? Like, so I just, and again, I think my experience of what I've just lived this past couple of years, losing excuse me, the faith of my childhood, divorce, my ex is gay, my mom passed away. Like, I feel like I've been prepared in a way for hardship. And so I was just listening to a quote that I think is in the Road Less Travel. Like, so it's Peck, I forget I think it's Scott Peck, but so he said, when we realize that life is going to be hard and we accept that fact, we stop worrying about it or questioning the fact that, like, yeah, life is hard. So what,
That also
what are you
sounds
going to do about it?
That's a Buddhist teaching as well.
Yeah, what are you going to do about it? You have to accept,
life
you
is
can't
suffering.
keep on complaining and saying, oh, life is so hard. Yes, that's just a fact, and just accept it. And, and again, not to deny our feelings, because I'm big about, if you feel crappy, you need to, if you feel sad or angry, I mean, express it. Like, I'm not saying repress everything or just pretend to be happy or whatnot. No.
So
it's a roller coaster.
So that's the kind of the concept of spiritual bypassing, which is sidestepping tough feelings, sidestepping grieving, using like prayer, fasting, reading scriptures, whatever. So how do you and we were taught to do that. Look on the positive, read your scriptures more, fast more, pray more. So how do you make sure you're not spiritually bypassing and you're actually doing the work, that you're actually dealing with the hard feelings? And then we can move to some questions.
Because I get depressed a lot. I deal with depression. Like, you see me all smiling and all that, but I have my moments and I get really depressed looking at, the sad things in the world and the pain, and even in my family, the fact that, but at the same time, I have my safety, how do you call them? Like floating floats, whatever you have on boats that's floating, and that's supposed to save
coping,
you.
Coping mechanisms you kind of use,
yeah, I have my tools, right? That I know what to do to get myself out of there, or out of the, you know, because I've been there. I mean, I know personally on a very deep level, I have anxiety attacks, I have depression at times, you know, thinking of those things. But I also have kids, and I also have, you know, people who love me around me and care about me, and, you know, and also so many people who go through so much worse. Like, I just force myself to, when I get there, it's important to be there and feel and be sad and be angry or whatever you want to be. But for me, it's also important to not dwell there, because it's not helpful in the end. I mean, if you stay there too long, it's a handicap, because you can't move forward. I can be, you know, creating and doing positive things if I stay there in that, you know, sad and hopeless. In fact, after watching that Netflix show, I was kind of very depressed. Wild Wild Country, because it just shows like this necessity for people to follow a leader, just any leader. Like, some people are just like, tell me what to do, because I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And
I don't know how to think this through.
Yes, and people take opportunity that, you know, because it is like, I remember being in, and again, I don't want to paint it as it was. Like I said, for me, it wasn't horrible to be a member of the church. Like, I didn't even leave like racism. Like, some people are like, oh, didn't you, you know, weren't people racist because you're a Black woman, and, you know, and the priesthood and this and that. For some reason, I did not live that. And I was at BYU, and I had a good time because I was very Mormon, and, you know, and all the country, like, I think people were giving me more attention and like making me feel special because I was different, you know.
Yeah.
Which I didn't mind at the time, but like, I didn't have that. Like, I still my roommates, I'm friends with my roommates from BYU and whatnot. Like, we don't believe the same things, and I think one thing is that I've also looked at people as people, and not just, you know, the ones who were like my friends because I was a member, they're not around, and I don't care. Like, if that was the, you know, the reason for a friendship, like, I don't need you around. But the people I've was close to, I mean, the hardest was my best friend in Belgium. She's still a very active member, but she also kind of lives it her own way. But it created friction for a while, because I was also trying to tell people, you know, how can you be in this church that just tells so many lies and whatnot? But you know what? For some people it works, and for some people it's their lifeline, and they don't know how they would live otherwise. And I have to respect that. You know?
It's their comfort, it's their strength, it's what they need,
and they believe it. They thoroughly, deeply believe it's true, and that's their choice. You know, I swallowed the red pill.
And I'm okay with that, as long as they're not trying to push it on people, or people who are leaving from their families, telling them it would be better you weren't born, or you should live it this way.
Right. And that's why I say, like, my friends who are still very, you know, believing members, they respect that. I respect them. I don't try to push anything on them. They don't try to push anything on me. We have that understanding, and we love each other at a person level. Like, you know, it's beyond church. Like, it's beyond that. And
it's a person to person connection, not if you're a church person to church person, which is very much more superficial. So let's kind of wrap this up. Let's see, Ashlen, it looks like
it looks like we got some great Q&A. Someone mentioned, and thank you guys for being so supportive who have been attendees through this video. They said, thanks so much for saying that. I'm still working through that concept. And
Which concept are we talking about?
It may have been, it like just came through. So it may have been what you were talking about. Instead of looking at the church person, you're looking at the person, but I could be wrong. Please correct me. Submitted that.
Gigi just put that through just as we were saying that. So I think that's what she was saying.
Yeah. Someone else asked a really good question. Do you feel like going through the process of learning to question the church and its authority has made you more inclined to question other forms of authority, like the media or the scientific epidemiologic data supporting the COVID-19 response? Have there been long-term effects on your ability to trust institutions?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I get really scared real fast when I feel like I'm going to be trapped in some kind of like group of, group think, this is how we think, and this is how everybody should think. I kind of put a stop like almost right away. I think I feel pretty lucky that I do have family and friends pretty much all over the world. Like I talk to Singapore and Dubai and Belgium and different places in the world, like Israel. And so I get information from all over. And so I'm able to kind of see how other people are seeing the situation. And I take everything with a grain of salt. I do, tend to listen more to, what the CDC will say. I'm not paranoid, but I don't trust easily, especially leaders like politicians and whatnot, like on any side. I don't easily trust people and organization and religions. I can't.
Well,
I
and
can't
I gotta
go in
say,
a church.
I'm with you too.
That's understandable.
No.
My trust level is very low, and I will question and I will read a ton. And
I appreciate people in the group, like in my support group, and I love that. We have a whole spectrum of some people who have found a different church, some people who are atheists, some people who are agnostic, some people are spiritual, and I respect everyone because it's a personal journey, and everyone needs to just be where they feel they belong. But as far as I'm concerned, I have like zero desire to belong to like a church or congregation or anything like that. And it doesn't mean I'm antisocial. I have plenty of friends and I love to go out and do stuff and whatnot, but I just want to kind of roam free and not have anyone tell me what to do or think or whatnot.
Well, and you mentioned too that someone commented, I love that you have friends all over the world. That's so nice to have that perspective of people in other countries. I'm constantly questioning what information we are getting through the media, if it's correct or false. What differing views have you gotten from your friends in other countries? I think that's a great question.
Well, unfortunately, I kind of have to push back a lot because they see the US as a hot mess, maybe beyond what it actually is. But anywhere in the world, my friends are like, what the heck are you doing there? And I have to be like, it is not as bad as what you see in the media. It's the same for them, right? They are being fed all the crazy stuff happening here. But for the most part, even here in Texas, where it seems like every other shooting is here in Texas or whatever, like we've had really bad publicity this year. And I live right here. And so I constantly am like, kind of looked down on. So it's good for me to push back. It also shows how alike we are. No matter where in the world, we worry about the same thing. We go through the same struggle, and especially now, we go through the same struggles. I mean, we are all quarantined, and we're all trying to sift through, what media comes at us. But the biggest thing is, their perspective of us is just not great. And again, and it's the same. I think what we have seen, for example, in Italy and Spain and Portugal, like I have a cousin who lives in Portugal, so that's very close to Italy. She's actually half Italian, but like these things are true and they're taking things seriously. Like Spain is, fining people for walking on the street when they don't need to, like $600, and they can go to jail. Because they also don't have the type of resources that we have. Like they're not, as big and whatnot. And so it can really fast create some, some huge crisis like they've seen in Italy. So they seem in some places to take things a bit more seriously. Maybe, I don't know. And I loved watching what was going on in Hong Kong, that they have been able to just repress almost all of it. I mean, they have 600 or 700 cases total, and very few deaths because they started wearing masks like right away, you know, not even gloves, just masks, and it worked. So I wish we would, as you know, the US, I'm not a citizen, my kids are. I wish we would learn a bit faster from other places. I feel like because it's such a big country, sometimes there is this sense of, oh, we know it all, we have the answers, we know what to do. And then look, you know, you now first, you know, on the charts, because, and France is a bit the same, but there's that lack of humility of learning from those who've made things work, because we think we have all the answers because we're the best, you know. And when I say we, I don't really include myself, but you know, the US.
Well, and that may echo what you experienced in the church as well, was we have all the answers, you know, and so I
very similar. That's why they like each other.
Sure. I think this is a really good question to end on. I think we've gotten through just about everyone. The only question that I have left is, did you ever see that the message of love and compassion was constantly preached, but in reality, the leaders practiced the opposite, using guilt, shame, and fear to oppress and control? How do you process that while still living in the group? And I kind of think this goes along with you talking about cognitive dissonance and learning what cognitive dissonance was. Would you like to elaborate on that a little bit?
Okay, I'm not sure if I understand the question properly. So it's basically from the pulpit, they preach, you know, love your neighbor, but then in reality, it's a lot of oppression. I think they have the perfect system to keep people under control, which is, you know, serve each other, do things for one another, have all these callings, make sure no one's forgotten. But the ultimate goal is to keep people inside of the very small circle, which, you know, it's a worldwide millions of people circle. But the ultimate goal isn't, I mean, yeah, celestial kingdom is like, you know, the carrot being kind of dangled, you know, like, and my bishop tried that on me when I was like, I'm out of here. It's like, you know, you're putting your whole family, the eternal salvation of your whole family on the line. I'm like, well, I don't believe that, so that's not going to work. But there is always something, because they know it has to be something bigger than them. So it keeps you from looking elsewhere than where they want you to look. And yes, because you're serving your own people, you always feel like you're doing something good. You know, if you teach your little lesson on Sunday and you go and bring some hot bread to your neighbor, like you oh, you know, I'm a good Christian, look what I'm doing, you know. That's why I see. And you know what, it works for some, but I'm still serving when I can. I'm still doing things where I can. I don't need someone to tell me I need to do it, or a church, or, you know, some kind of organization. I think ultimately we choose who we want to be, and finding that authentic voice, you know, devoiding ourselves from everything we've been given. Because from the moment, again, we're born, we're told this is how you should be, this is how you should act, this is what you should believe. So it takes time to take out all of these things that have been placed in us, and to realize that ultimately we are our own master. We can choose what we want to believe. We can choose to be true to our own truth. And yes, it comes at a cost, you know, again, to take the Matrix as an analogy, but I chose the red pill, and I'm glad I did, you know.
Well, and I want to thank you, Juliana, for sharing your story. You were so transparent, and that authenticity really shined through. So thank you for that. And for, you know, there's a sense of vulnerability. Like even if you are in a place where you do feel, you know, quite comfortable in sharing or what have you, it's still a vulnerable experience. And I know a lot of people, I've had comments coming through, people really appreciated your talk today and participating. And thank you, Cyndi, for kind of guiding her along in her story. It just seamlessly flowed, honestly. And so thank you to both of you. And I just, you know, it's a bummer that the Dallas event has been moved to September, but it's been really cool to hear Dallas speakers who were going to participate come on and share.
Yeah, and
so,
next week we're going to have 3 more that
yes,
we'll be having conversations again.